Okay. We will go for 45 minutes or 44 to 45 minutes. Then we go a short break. Then we continue. Or maybe So we see how. Okay. All right. So we have gone through all this information. For this module, we have 2 tests, 1 group assignment, 2 individual assignment, and final exam. Okay. So just take note on the test week 7 or week 8. The actual date I will give you when the office had circulate the date out. Okay. These are the 4 books that I refer to. These are the 4 books, right? Okay. So today we're going to look at chapter 1. We're going to look at design process and technology. So these are the 4 main area we're going to look at in chapter 1. So I'm referring to this textbook. We try to finish process planning, then we can go along. Let's see how we do. Okay, so let's start with process planning. Okay, now let's watch a YouTube video just behind me. So let's look at how chocolate manufacturer.
Hi, I'm Mark Summers. Welcome to Unwrapped. Candy, it is a staple in American pop culture. Ready for this, $14 billion worth is purchased each year, and undoubtedly, candy bars make up a huge bite of that profit. And a preference for candy bars really isn't something new. Their history goes back more than a century, and a major part of that history is the name that definitely put some sweet into the American tooth. It's got to be Hershey. Shake, rattle, and roll. Welcome to the Hershey factory in Hershey, Pennsylvania, birthplace to billions of bars.
At the Hershey plant here in Hershey, Pennsylvania, we produce well over 1.5 billion pounds of chocolate.
The candy bar, the factory, the town, all are named for Milton Hershey, chocolatier extraordinaire. Hershey was born near, Hershey, Pennsylvania in 1857 and went into the candy business at age 18. But the sweet taste of success didn't come easy.
In 1876, for the centennial, he went to Philadelphia, started his own company. That company failed. He went on to build and start 3 more companies, all of which failed.
Hershey's confection companies finally stopped failing around 1900 when he started to make a popular line of chocolate syrups and candies. And his premier product was the simple but scrumptious Hershey bar. Today, Milton's namesake is still almost the exact recipe he came up with in the late 1890s. A mix of cocoa beans, sugar, and milk. But don't be fooled. Making it is still a major production.
So while it seems like a very simple product and anyone can make chocolate, it's really very hard, very challenging. There's a lot of science and technology in there.
Here in Chocolate Land, science and technology means enough gizmos, gadgets, and gadgets to make Willy Wonka weep. Big blades first mix the dry blend of cocoa and sugar called crumb. Then huge mixers called conches roll up and stir the chocolate for up to 3 days. Then the chocolate paste is squirted into molds, passed through tunnels, cooled down, and wrapped up.
So by the time we receive the bean till it's wrapped, put in its wrapper, and on its way out the door can be 4 to 7 days.
So what's the secret to getting the bars shaped just right?
We shake that bar to evenly distribute it in the mold, so when it's cooled, it comes out as a square bar.
But it's during this dangerous trip down Shakedown Street that many good bars go bad. Unfilled corners, air bubbles, broken edges, all will disqualify a bar from making it to the wrappers and cause them to be picked off by the eagle-eyed inspectors.
And the Hershey bar has to be perfect when you look at it. We like a perfect look, perfect feel.
So why do Hershey bars come in that flat rectangle shape?
I've never been asked that question in 15 years. Okay.
Okay, so there may not be an answer to how this candy began as a bar, but whatever the reason, the recognizable rectangle is here to stay.
A rectangle is a shape everybody's comfortable with. It's easy to make, it's easy to mold and manufacture.
The shape may be simple, but there is a mystery that surrounds this chocolate bar. That well-known, oh so familiar wrapper, what color is it?
Brown.
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 Brown and white and silver.
Close, but not quite. The chocolate may be brown, but Mike says the wrapper's maroon and silver, and always has been.
The maroon and silver that is used on the Hershey bar wrapper has been fairly consistent since 1900.
Mike says consistency is actually the most difficult part of making those billions of bars.
If your grandma opens a candy bar, she wants to taste that Hershey flavor she had as a kid.
After all, a lot of things have changed in the last 100 years, but a chocolate bar is always in good taste.
Okay. Now, just now is from this video just now. You see from the video, you will see they use different technology, and even a quick one, you see how they use machine to write the things. Okay, and they even come up with a special aluminum sheet to write the chocolate itself. Right? So let's deal with some definition about some term. The first one, we go for process. Okay. Now, what is process? Since the first session, we deal with process planning. So this is the definition for process. Process is something related to task. What a task is means something you want to achieve. You group a series of tasks together with input and output. You achieve a task or series of tasks with input and output. Input can be the material, the raw material, and task is, you can say, as the process. Output is the product. Okay, so process. This is the definition. A group of related tasks with specific input and output. This is the definition for process. What if you add another term behind the process? What is process design? So this is how the textbook define. Process design is, again, process is task. So process design is you design what or how the task being carried out. Okay, process design, it means you decide how to achieve the task, and the rest is just can read from the screen here. Okay, process and process design. Okay, process and process design. Third one, if you change the design to strategy, what mean by strategy? Is an approach. Okay, strategy means what approach you take, what method you take to achieve the final products or to produce the final products. So process is a task. You can say process is a task with the input and output. Process design is how the task being completed or achieved. Strategy is, you can say, as a plan or approach. Okay, strategy is a method to achieve the final products. So make sure you understand. These are the keyword. Every time you mention process, then it's more about task. When talking about process design, then we talk about how or why we do it. Strategy is how we do it, right? Or what method we use. Okay. These are the things that you can read from the slides later on. Process strategy consists of 1, 2, 3, 4. So this one I will let you to read. I'll just touch on the important point. The first one you see is vertical integration. What is vertical integration in process strategy? It is the control of the process. Vertical integration is a control of your production process. The second keyword, capital intensity. Capital, the word capital, it means resources. Capital, it means resources. So you put in the manufacturing environment, resources not only limited to money, but it involves equipment and the system that you use. For example, automation system that you use. Okay, so capital, it means resources. Process flexibility means the word flexibility, process flexibility, the flexibilities tell you how the factory or how the corporation respond to changes. Okay, flexibility is how the company respond to changes. Okay, so all these are the input that you can put into the tutorial question. Customer involvement. Customer involvement means at the end, when you're manufacturing something, when you produce something, at the end you want to sell the product to your end user. So customer involvement, it means you involve customer, you involve the input from your end user. Okay, so process strategy is your approach, and it involves these 4 areas. It involves how you control the process, how you control your resources, how you adapt to changes, the competition, how you make the customer happy. Okay, so this is the strategy or the method to achieve your target. Any questions so far?
No, doctor.
Okay, good. Let's move to the next slides. We have covered process, we have covered design, we have covered strategy. Now, what is process planning? Process planning, keyword is instruction. You put your design, your idea into instruction to make the products. Okay, planning means you put your idea or design into instruction, means steps to do things. Step 1, you do what? Step 2, you do that. Okay, this is called planning. So cover design, strategy, planning. Okay. And inside this instruction, it will cover outsourcing decision, process, and plan. Process selection and process plan. Okay. Now up to here, maybe you have a question, how will the final exam or test question come out? All right. Since all this you can read from the PowerPoint slides, how do we ask you question? The question that will come out in test or final exam will be testing your understanding and applying the concept that you learn from each one of these. Okay, there will be no question ask you how to define this one, what is the meaning of this one, what is the meaning of this one. But the question will ask you how you apply what you learn in the lecture. For example, I give you a scenario. Most of the time, the question you get in the question will be a scenario question. Maybe I give you a chocolate company, like the video that you see. Chocolate company intended to mass produce a certain flavor of chocolate. The question will go, explain your process planning to produce that end products. So in your answer, we expect you to cover outsourcing decision. You explain how you do outsourcing decision, how you do process selection, how you do process plan. That kind of question. You need to think, to write out what you understand, the concept, right? You need to learn something from the lecture and then apply in a scenario. That will happen in your test and final exam. And even in your assignment also. Assignment won't ask you to define this word or that word. Your assignment will ask you to apply what you learn, do some calculation to prove you understand what we cover in the lecture. Okay, so for process planning, we have 3 main things you need to cover. Process planning, you convert design into instruction. When you explain about process planning, you need to involve how you do outsourcing decision, or what is outsourcing decision, what is process selection, what is your process plan. You need to give example. And each one of you, you're individual, you're unique, that you have a different experience, you come from different family background, some of you come from different country, so we expect your answer will be different. But the concept still there. The structure of your answer still there. First, you answer how do you do outsourcing? How do you choose the process? How do you do the plan? Okay? We go for outsourcing decision. Okay? How do you, under process planning, what is outsourcing decision? So outsourcing decision, for example, chocolate, right? Chocolate company. So here, a firm that sells products, assembly, and so on, is completely vertical integrated. What mean by vertical integrated? It means if the company, he start the process of manufacturing from raw material until he sell the products to the end user, from raw material until the product is finished, is called vertical integrated. It means the company do outsourcing from the raw material until the products. For example, you heard Starbucks before, right? So when you go to Starbucks nowadays have their own coffee bean farm. They start with the coffee bean and then they go roasting. They have their own outlets. They have barista there, and then they make the coffee and sell it to you. The whole process from raw material until the cup of coffee reach the hand of a customer, it's called vertically integrated. This is the first one. Ask yourself, are you able to give example of a firm that completely vertically integrated? This is how we ask you in test or final exam. Explain vertically integrated or explain a completely vertical integrated company with an example. So you explain. Just now I give you an example of Starbucks. So there are many more examples that start the process from raw material until the finished products that reach the end user. Okay, ask yourself this question. What are the other examples that are vertically integrated? Okay, I'll open the question to the floor. Let me ask a question. Any one of you will able to give me other example? Just now I give you Starbucks, right? I even give you the chocolate video. Are you able to give me one example of a company that can define as completely vertical integrated? Everyone will get a question for me. So if you answer, then I will skip your name in the next question. Any one of you, you want to respond?
McD, doctor.
Your name, sorry?
Dakshinamurthy.
Huh?
Dakshinamurthy.
Murthy, yeah?
Yes,
okay.
yes.
So can you explain McDonald? Just now you McDonald. How do you define, or how do you know it is vertical integrated? What is the raw material?
The raw material is, because McD is a fast food outlet, right? So the raw material, the patties for the meat and the French fries, and even the bread that they have, everything, they have their own factories to produce it as a raw material, and then they process it, and then subsequently they send it to their outlets, and in the outlet it will be prepared for the end user, the customer, and we buy it as an end product.
Okay, good. Now, McDonald is a very complex company, but yeah, it meets the definition of vertical integrated. You need to be careful on the word raw material. Raw material, it can be start from a cow itself. For example, McDonald sell burgers, right? So burgers makes of chicken, meat, and so on. So you have to ask yourself, does the McDonald have their own chicken farm? You have to ask yourself this kind of question, right?
Yes.
But anyway, yeah. So raw material, it can be raw chicken meat. So maybe they have their own, I don't know. Maybe they have their own supplier for this one. So, but anyway, it is a good example for vertical integration. All right. Right. So as you can see here, vertical integration is start from raw material. For example, this one is more on the meat, for meat. Let's say a company is selling a meat of this one, I think is cow, cattle, right? Right. So again, I apologize, those who, if you don't take beef, I'm not personal attack you, but this is just an illustration. But I hope you get the idea what is vertical integration. You start from a raw material. It can be chicken, it can be it can be a fruit farm, right? It can be from like a coffee bean. You start from a bean, and then you start to integrate and then into your end user. This is a simple example from a raw material to that one. Another example, you can all of you eat street burger, right? For example, Ramly Burger. You know what is Ramly Burger, right? I'm not sure whether we have an overseas student here, but I think if you're long enough, stay long enough in Malaysia, you know what is Ramly Burger. So Ramly Burger, I believe they have their own chicken farm and they sell the burger meat. So this is another example of a vertical integrated. Since the word since we introduce you to vertical integrated, they must be another opposite meaning. Vertical integrated and horizontal integrated. What mean by horizontal integrated? As you can see here, this is another example for oil company. So they buy other company have the same industry. For example, if you know Petronas, Petronas is an oil company. So then if you drive your car to the city, along the way you will see Petron, you will see Caltex, you will see a lot of other brands, Shell and all this. So maybe there will be one company that is buying all these services from the same industry. Then they call horizontal integrated. The keyword is same industry. Okay? The keyword is same company. So you try to compare left and right. Integrated is more independent. But if you are in a horizontal integration, means you need to depend or you get help from the same industry. You get the same supplier or from, okay, for example, computer industry or microprocessor industry, for example, Intel and all this. So if you're in the gaming industry or you're in the, something that relate to computer, you know that there are lots of supplier that do microprocessor chip and all this, right? So there will be a same supplier that supply parts to the factory. For example, camera. Okay, if you have a camera, whether it's Canon, Sony, or other brands, you know that camera have lots of parts. So you get all the parts from the same industry, also consider horizontal integration. So something like that. Okay, the keyword is same industry. So I hope you can differentiate what is vertical integration and horizontal integration. Or you can say, what is the keyword for vertical? Raw material. Raw material until products. Then this one is you purchase things from the same industry. Okay. Okay. This is other things that we should think about. Not all company can be vertical integrated because the cost of processing from raw material until end of the products or end user products, it will be very high. You need a very big capital. You need a very big resources. So again, I highlight with the red box here, not all startup company or not all company, they can go for vertical integration. So if you study a little bit, you will discover that vertical integrated, normally they are old company, they are in the industry for so many years that have built up the capital to go until the raw material. Okay. Of course, this is more on the companies. If you go to a fishing village, right? If you go to a fishing village, then the small restaurant, the seafood restaurant in the kampong or in the fishing village also can be vertically integrated, because the restaurant, the seafood restaurant, the owner, maybe he have a fishing boat that supply the raw material from the sea. He have his fishing boat, and then the fishing boat supply the material to the restaurant, to the seafood restaurant. That also another example of vertically integrated. But this one, this box, it means those big company lah. Okay, so the another small company like the seafood company with the fishing boat just now, the tauke with the fishing boat, then that one also fall under vertically. But again, if you're in the fishing industry, you know that fishing boat also not cheap. Okay, fishing boat also not cheap. So not many seafood company or seafood restaurant, they have their own fishing boat. Okay, so again, this is just a reminder on this vertical integrated point. Okay, so because of the red color situation, not all company will do that, especially those SME, small and medium industry. They will not able, or they will not go up to raw material. So most of the strategy decision that they make, they will think about whether the raw material I can get from other supplier, or it's more cheaper that I produce myself. So this is the decision that the company need to think about. Okay, so this is a situation that faced by most company. So this is the solution, or this is the strategy that motivates the company to think how they get the resources they need. Either they produce themselves or they get from outside. So later, this point will link to other slides later on. Okay, so this point link to this point. Next. Okay, so I bring up the vertical integration on this side. We are now still at outsourcing. Outsourcing means you need to look outside your company to decide whether you need to fabricate yourself, make the raw part yourself, or you need to buy things from outside. So there will be some criteria when you are the boss of that company, or you are the manager, the factory manager, the floor manager, that you need to make decision on what basis. On what basis means on what reason that you think that the item need to be made in-house. Okay, this can be an assignment question, or this can be a test question. When should the item be outsourced? How you select the supplier? What type of relationship between your supplier? Either you sign a contract to control the supply, or you do partnership, or you do alliance. Okay, so if you have been in the, if you work, or you have friends work in the Starbucks, or you have friends work in the factory before, then you know there are some agreement on the supply. Okay, if you have supplier, there will be a set of standard or requirement that you need from the supplier. How many supplier that you should use? Okay, so if you are in the Intel chip, or you are if you're in the microprocessor industry, or you are work in an Intel or microchip processor company or factory, then you know that you have a lot of supplier list. Even for example, even the supermarket that you have, right? For example, Ion or Giant or Jaya Jasco, Jaya Grocer, right? So they have different supplier in their supplier list. Okay, so different market will have different criteria of the supplier. That's why when you go to Jasco to buy stuff, you know that the quality and the stuff, the prices will be different from the Giant. right? Or even the Jaya Grocer. So you know there's a set of quality there, all right? And yeah, so these are the criteria on the supplier. Also another supplier. So how do you tighten the relationship between the supplier? So these are the questions when you do outsourcing, when you do whether you want to ask other people to supply the raw material for you or you make it in-house. So is it more easier to make in-house or you just sort for supplier to supply for you? Okay, so these are the questions that normally the manager or the owner of the company, they will look at all this. Okay. Normally it's a plant manager, it's a GM, plant manager, they will look at all this. Okay, so if you go to factory manufacturing setup, what position will deal with supplier? There's a position called planner. They will do negotiation. They will do shortlisting of their supplier. That fall under planning department. Okay, or they call it planner. Right, the planner. Right, factory. If you're in a factory setup kind of company, after you graduate, you go to the factory. You work as an engineer, and most of the time you will see that the planner will always argue with the production floor, right? Because of the supply issue, especially because my first job I worked as a project engineer. So my job is to produce a prototype, right? Produce a prototype for my customer. Then after you have the first products, the prototypes, then you pass the product to the production floor to manufacture it. So I'm the one who take the prototypes list and then I pass it to planner. Planner will do sorting and then they will buy material from from a supplier, and then the production floor will get the material to mass produce it. So this is the thing that will happen if you go to work. Okay. A few factors here. This one is a question, a few factors. The first one is cost, of course. So if you go to work, or even I think you can feel, the first thing come into your decision making is cost. If you want to buy something, first thing in your mind, you will ask how much is it. So first thing when you do outsourcing decision is cost. So will it cheaper to make item or buy it, or to perform in-house or outsource it? First, you consider the cost of making inside, or you outsource it is more cheaper. Okay, so this one is a decision on cost. Number two, capacity. So capacity is look at whether you're able to make it or not in your own factory floor that you have. Are you able to operate at a full capacity? Are you able to cope with the needs? Okay. So if the company operate at less of their full capacity, what does it mean? It means if the factory one day he turn on all the machine and works 24, maybe 2 shifts in the company. First shift work from 8 to 8, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Second shift is from 8 p.m. to the next day 8 a.m. So let's say the company do full shift to full capacities, not full, have the capability of full, can do 2 shifts, but currently the factory is running only have 1 shift. So the company, the factory floor now only do 8 a.m. to night 8 p.m. then close shop already. So the company can decide whether he want to increase the operating capacity, whether the company can do 2 shifts to increase the capacity so that they can produce the component themselves. The first scenario is that they are underperformed, means they have the facilities, only they are not at the full capacities, means they do not perform at the full capacities. So they can consider to make the parts in where they can consider to make the component in-house rather than find a supplier. This is one of the criteria, capacity. Okay, now this question might be come up in your assignment. So you need to give example why cost is important, and then you give example. What are the costs made inside? What is the cost made outside? You need to find information. Okay, what are the costs made inside? What are the costs made outside? And then where are the supplier and so on this. Then the capacities area, whether the factory is working at the full capacities or not. So you decide. If it works less than the full capacities, then you can consider to make the component in-house rather than supply them. This is another scenario. This is below capacities. Sometimes even the company work full shift, mean 2 shifts, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., 8 p.m. to next day 8 a.m. means 24-hour operation. Also cannot cope with the capacities. All right. Then there are 2 options. If you already run at 100% capacity and you still not able to produce the order, okay, but you're still not able to produce the order, there are 2 options that you can do. One, either you change your production floor to manufacture more customized item. Means you only focus on more core items, and then you supply, and then you outsource. You outsource those that you are not make in-house. There are 2 decisions here. If your factory already run at 100% capacities and you're still not meeting the order, what you can do, first, you can choose to make customized item. You focus on some important component. Then you outsource the things. You outsource the other parts. You get supplier for other parts. Then you do assembly in-house. You get supplier from other supplier. You bring them in the company, combine with your custom-made or your focus core parts. Then you sell it to the customer. So these are the decisions that you can make. One, what happens if you underperform or below full capacity, what you do? What happens if you already run at 100% capacities already, but you still not meeting, you still cannot cope with the order, the customer order, too high already for you. So what you can do is that you can make these 2 decisions. Okay, so far anything makes sense to you, right? So factor, cost, capacities. One, quality. When you do outsourcing decision, you not only need cost and capacity. The third one is the quality that you deliver to your customers. Okay. So you need to consider whether you able to keep the consistent quality or not. When you decide to outsourcing the parts, means you decide to look for supplier to supply the individual parts to you. For example, McDonald's just now, the McDonald's just now. Does it make sense? You know, the McDonald's, you have the right, right? You have the papers and the burger right? So it doesn't make sense for a McDonald's to produce paper from a timberland, you know, buy a timber and then chop the timber and then make paper and then supply to the restaurant. So it doesn't make sense. So one thing that outsourcing is that the burger right, the burger paper, right? So this is one of the things that the McDonald's can decide. They can decide a supplier, they can outsource the paper right for the burger, that the supplier can produce a consistent quality to the McDonald's, for example. Then they don't need to worry about the paper right anymore. So this is one of the examples for outsourcing decision, the quality. Okay. So when you outsourcing, these are the important keywords. Standardization means there will be an agreement between you and the supplier. What are the quality that you should meet? For example, do you meet the ISO standard and so on? So there will be a standardization of the parts. There will be, for example, some restaurant required the supplier, let's say McDonald's. They might, I don't know, they might request the supplier of the meat to have the halal certification. This is one of the standardization exercise, where if you want to be a supplier for McDonald's, for example, or a supplier for KFC, your chicken, the raw chicken meat that you supply to KFC or McDonald's, then it should be halal certified, for example, in Malaysia context, right? So these are one of the things that they look for if they outsource the thing. Okay. Now I know KFC have some collaboration with a lot of supplier. All right. So it will fall under this category, right? All right. The next factor that you decide whether you want to outsource decision is the speed. Speed of getting the parts that you need. Okay, speed, cost, capacity, quality. Next one is speed. Because speed itself, it will control your assembly time. Sometimes the most dangerous one is a transit time. If you get the parts from offshore shipment. All right. Now, given nowadays the setup in a factory, if the company is doing assembly, most of the parts, the company get most of the parts. They get from China, they get from India, they get from those developing countries that offer them a cheaper cost to get the parts. Then one of the risks that need to consider is the speed. Whether they need a lengthy transition time or not of the shipment. Okay. Now, nowadays, although we still have a lot of shipment company out there, shipment, if you use sea travel, it still have a risk there, especially when the item travel across the ocean that have a bad weather and so this. All right. Now you need to consider whether your shipment is worth to take a long time to wait for the shipment for the assembly. This part is a consideration for those planner, right? Factory floor planner. They need to consider the transit time. All right. There are many types of shipment you can do. You can do air shipment. If you have an urgent case, you do air shipment. However, air shipment is very expensive because you transport item using aircraft. And aircraft fuel is very high, so they will charge very high. you get to save time. And they have a air transit. They also have sea or water transit. So water transit, whether transport or shipment, use water. Overseas, it will take time. Sometimes it takes 6 months, 3 months to reach, right, from one point to another point. So you need to consider this one. So outsourcing decision, you consider cost, capacity, quality, speed. One thing, you're standing at the point of a big company, for example, Intel or other big company. So you have to understand that sometimes a smaller supplier, they are more flexible to cater for your needs, especially a company are making prototyping, a new products. Then your supplier, most of the time, they will prefer smaller company that offer them flexibility. Okay? Because the bigger company you grow, bigger company you go, if the supply is getting bigger and bigger, then you involve with a loss of SOP, you involve with a loss of regulation. Then sometimes the flexibility is one of the issue when you have a bigger company. One box here, when you go to work later on, speed is important, but have to make sure they are reliable. Some supplier, they promise you they can deliver the product so and so, but they are not reliable. Meaning, for example, you're buying some parts from the supplier, right? And this supplier promise you he can produce the parts to you, supply the parts to you within 1 week. But when you receive the items after 7 weeks or even 3 days later on, the parts cannot be used, right? The dimension is not correct. So this is fall under not reliable. So speed is important, but reliable is more important because reliability will affect your quality. Okay, so quality comes first before the speed. But of course, if you can have resources, then this is not a problem. Next one, reliability. Reliability, it will connect the quality and the speed of their delivery. So reliability means consistency in the services. And one thing that if you work in the factory later on, you will deal with this ISO, especially when after you work for a few years as an engineer, then you promoted to manager, and when you need to look for your supplier, when you are in that position to make outsourcing decision, one of the certification that tell you your supplier is reliable is this one, ISO 9000. Okay, ISO 9000 is a certification that recognized worldwide. If you meet this criteria, mean you are a reliable supplier. There are lots of rules, there are lots of documents, there are lots of exercise you need to meet under this ISO 9000. Okay. Another one, when you do outsourcing, you need to see whether your supplier have that expertise or not. Whether the area of that particular parts, are they specialized in it or not? Okay. So company that specialize in the certain services, they usually have a very tight QA or quality control in their production. Okay, so these are the area that you should consider. Okay, one example is Coca-Cola. Do you know that Coca-Cola, they never sell their secret, although there are some leak in the recipe, but nowadays, nobody can copy the recipe of Coca-Cola. They are the expertise in soft drinks, in their products. So although they are making Coca-Cola, the drinks, the liquid itself, Coca-Cola is a very special company where they do not get supply from anyone for the liquid. They get supply for their bottles, but as I know, Coca-Cola have their own water company that do this one for them. So yeah, so maybe if you have time, I hope the COVID condition will be stabilized, then maybe, no promise, maybe I'll bring you to Coca-Cola company or maybe chocolate company to have a visit there. Then you appreciate what you learn in this module. Okay, so this is expertise. Okay, I think I stop here. All right, let me end the recording.